Hello, everybody. Welcome back. We are going to wrap up lesson 3-4. I want to do this application question here, this word problem, and make sure we all understand how to translate a problem like this into an inequality. So please take your time on this question. It's important that you understand where everything comes from. It's a bit of a tricky one compared to the one that I'm going to ask you to do in your homework when you get into class. So get it down and rewatch the video as is appropriate to where you feel like you have an understanding of where my equation or my inequality and my variable is coming from and what it all means. So let's get right to it, and hopefully we can keep this video short. It says it is on page 191, and it's number 45 in your book. It says the student council wants to rent a ballroom for the junior prom. The ballroom's rental rate is $1,500 for 3 hours and $125 for each additional half hour. Suppose the student council raises $2,125. It asks, what is the maximum number of hours which they can rent the ballroom? Now there is a lot of stuff going on in this problem here. So let's start unpacking it here. Probably the first piece of information we need to be aware of is this right here. It's $1,500 for the first 3 hours. Okay, so you're renting this place and you have to buy 3 hours, and that's going to be $1,500. So I'm just going to make a note there. You're going to get the first 3 hours for that price right there. Okay, so 3 hours for $1,500. That's something you know. That's important to be aware of. And then here's another interesting thing. It's $125 for each additional half hour. You see that? You're paying $125 per half hour. Okay, so there's a couple ways we could deal with that. 125 per half hour. Well, if you think, oops, I meant to say 0.5 hours. Okay, well, if you consider how much then would you pay for 1 full hour? You would pay 250, right, for 1 hour because you're paying 125 for a half hour there. So it would probably be easiest for us to just deal with this right here instead of that. It would make our algebra equation a little less complicated. So I'm going to go ahead and say, well, 125 for a half hour is equal to 250 for 1 hour. Okay, now the last piece of information, it says, well, they raise $2,125. We're going to assume all of that money is for this. We're not going to guess other costs based on the context of this question and what we know. So then the last most important thing is, what is it they're asking you for? They're asking you, well, what is the maximum number of hours that they can rent this ballroom? Okay, and because they could rent less than the maximum number of hours, but we want to know what is the most that they can rent the ballroom for. Okay, so there's a lot in there, as you can see. Now, again, our goal in algebra is to turn this into an equation that contains a variable, and we want to begin by defining our variable. Now, we've talked about this in class. This needs to become a habit for you, and you need to start practicing. You define your variable by telling me on your paper what is it that you will have found when you're done. Okay, when you're done, you would have found the maximum number of hours. Now, this is what X is going to represent, the max hours. Okay, now I'm going to make a note here. You realize that you get the first 3 hours free, so I'm not going to include that. I'm going to say the maximum hours less 3 that they can rent the ballroom. Okay, so if you're confused on why I did this less 3, it's because you have to buy 3 for $1,500. After 3 hours, it's based on a per hour rate. Okay, so maybe it'll make sense as I show you the equation here. Okay, since I know it's 125, or actually I decided I'm going to use this, 250 for 1 hour. All right, and X represents hours. All right, I'm going to pay them then $250 times X. Okay, that's going to represent Um, that's going to represent the money after money per hour after 3. Okay. Um, let's see. The 1500, that's what you pay for the first 3. Okay. And then 2125, that's all of your money. Okay, 2,125, that's your total, the total amount of money that you have. So I'm going to do something here. I'm going to exit out of this. You'll still be able to see everything fine. It'll just allow me to scroll down my page a little more here. Okay, so with that information, here's what I know. I can pay $250 times X. Okay, that's what you're going to pay after 3. Plus you have to pay for the first 3 hours, which is 1,500. All right, I know when I combine that total together, it has to be less than or equal to 2,125 because the maximum, this is going to be the maximum number of hours, whatever it equals. Okay, that or equal to right there. So at this point, you now have an inequality, kind of like the homework problems from the other video that you should be about ready to solve. So you're now just going to solve this question by subtracting 1,500 from both sides. And we do our math there. We end up with 250x less than or, oops, left off the f, x less than or equal to. If I subtract that out, you can double check me. I believe it's 625. All right, now I want to go ahead and solve this. I'm going to divide this by 250. Now you should be asking yourself, do I flip my sign? Should I flip that sign? You do not flip the sign because you did not divide by a negative. You divided by a positive number. So it stays x less than or equal to, then 625 divided by 250, that comes out to be 2.5. But is that the answer to the question? Because the question asks what's the maximum number of hours they can rent. Is it 2.5? Well, it's not, because you see what we did not include. We have to remember that we are getting 3 hours for 1,500. Okay, so remember x, that is the total of hours less than 3 that they can rent. So you're going to get 2.5 hours, and you're going to get 3 hours on top of that. So the maximum number of hours would be the sum of those two numbers. The maximum hours would be 2.5 plus 3, which would equal 5.5 hours. That's the most number of hours you could buy this ballroom on that particular budget right there. So again, please review how we define our variable and how we create the inequality or equation with the variable. That's a pretty big deal. That's what this class is really all about. So bring that to class tomorrow, and then you should be able to do one of the homework questions with that model in class.